Hello and welcome to Psychology Internationals. I created this channel to help a lot of my students with their questions. So instead of just keeping it secret to us, we decided to maybe share these ones in the internet and YouTube specifically, and see if we can help a wider group of people. So we're going to try to create more content related to the CIE, the 9990 syllabus in the next few months coming up to the exams, if you're taking exams, or in the future as well, if you're going to sit uh, in future series in the upcoming year. So if you subscribe and like the material, maybe I'll feel more motivated to create more. So one of the things that I wanted to cover today is the design questions in paper 2. I know these are probably the scariest questions that from what I gather from my students. My students tend to find these ones, um, like I said, the most scary questions according to my students. Without a doubt, I think we can practice every single other type of question, but these ones are the ones that people tend to panic the most. So you have to think on your feet in this one. So it is a little bit different than other ones. I think the other ones you can almost learn them by rote. These ones are a little bit more difficult in that respect. You have to think on your feet and be reasonably familiar with theory. So all the core studies that you cover throughout the year and their application. So in other words, the research method sections that your teacher is probably covering with you or already covered with you at the beginning of the year. Depends on how he approaches or she approaches it. I tell my students that despite this fear that they have about these questions, they should not panic because even if you hate this, there are ways in which you can approach them. So there's a strategy to go into the exam in order to answer these ones and leave that exam with a healthy amount of marks for these questions. So keep in mind that this is how we do them in my classroom. So it is what works for us. Your teacher might have other strategies and other ways of doing them, but this is what works for us, and maybe we wanted to share with you, see if you can get anything out of it. If you do, again, just let us know in the comments below, and then we'll do more for you. So the best way to approach these questions is to answer 5 key research questions. The what, the who, where and when, and the how. Each of these sections will require you to include some very important research features in each of those sections. I will try to guide you through each of these sections and give you some idea of the content necessary for you to maximize your marks. So what is the what? In this section, you will need to include what methods will you be using to collect data. So it's not your procedure. I think a lot of people get confused with this between the what and the how. This is what methods you will be using to collect the data in your study. So most of these questions will give you a hint regarding the method needed. So it's up to you to state the independent and dependent variable. So what I mean by that is to pay attention to the instructions in the questions, because if you read them properly, you'll find that a lot of the methods that you have to use are already in the questions. You just have to flesh it out into your essay. So pay attention to the question. If you, as a revision technique or exam technique, take a pen or a highlighter and go through the question. Take 30 seconds to go through the question properly in order to understand what they actually want from you. So you will have to state the independent variable and dependent variable in this section. So for example, if you're using a questionnaire, it is very important that you mention which type of questions your questionnaire will be using. So will you use a closed questionnaire, or you have open questions, which will collect more qualitative data? You need to give examples of the questions used in that questionnaire. So 1 or 2 examples. Will it have a questionnaire? Will your questionnaire have a rating scale? you need to explain how the rating scale will work, 0 to 5, whatever type of rating scale you're going to use. You need to describe it a little bit. Okay, so will your questionnaire yield quantitative data or qualitative data, or will it collect both types of data? You need to mention that in the what section. Just be mindful, this is not how you will be using these ones. You just tell them what you will be using. It is later in the how section that you need to tell them how you will be using these methods in order to collect data. So it's what methods you'll be using in your with your participants. Okay, so if you can see there, you need to talk about how you will be collecting your data. So that means that you will have to talk about your dependent variable. You'll be in that example, you'll have to talk about the examples of questions that you'll be asking your participants. So some sort of independent variable operationalization also goes into this section. So I'm going to give you another example. So for example, if you're carrying out an observation, what kind of observation will it be? Will it be a naturalistic observation? Will it be a participant's observation? You need to tell the reader or the examiner, more importantly, what type of observation you will be engaging in, and don't just throw the name there. Try to describe in some sort of detail what, for example, a naturalistic observation is, or what a participant observation is. If you're having an observation, how many observers will you have? Will you just have one person, or you will have many observers? How will you operationalize your dependent variable? Will you have a predetermined behavioral checklist that you will take to your observation? So you've decided what behaviors you're going to count and measure, or will you just do a less structured observation in which categories of behaviors will pop up through an unstructured sort of interview? But you need to tell them how you will operationalize your dependent variable. You need to tell them what you will be counting in detail. Okay, so for example, in Milgram, he wanted to measure aggression in children, but he didn't just tell you that he was measuring aggression. He actually operationalized it later as punching, kicking, all those behaviors that he was counting. So you need to let the examiner know a few examples of the behaviors in your checklist if you're using an observation. How many observations will you be using? Will it be 2 or 3? Will you just do one big one, or you'll just come back to your to your participants every once in a while? Will it be a longitudinal study? How long will the observation last? How long will you observe the event? There's different ways of doing it. If you check your research method sections, there's different protocols of observation. You could include one of those here. But always keep it simple. Don't just go through research methods and try to do something complicated, because it may end up being harmful for your structure and for the clarity of your answer. So here are some of the components. You can pause this if you want to take a look at it later. Some of the key components for some of the main research methods that you could be asked for in that question. So take a look at those, use them if you want to. For example, if you're going to do a case study, it's probably going to be just one participant. What methods of data collection will you be using with that participant? Will you do several interviews, several questionnaires? How long will it be? Will it be in his house or her house, or will it be you asking? Depending on the type of research methods, you will have to add some of these key features about research that are necessary in order for you to score the marks for this section. So again, just to remind you, please remember, this is not your procedure. Your procedure comes later. This is what you will be doing, not how you will be doing it. So here are a bit more easier sections that you need to complete. So the first one will be your who, and this is your participants. Who will your participants be? So if in doubt, I always tell my students to use 50 participants, 20 females, 20 males. That's good enough. You don't need to go into a lot of detail describing your participants. You could be asked, and it may be relevant that you have to add some detail about participants, but that's usually not the case all the time. Try to recruit a sample that is relevant for your studies. So, for example, if the question asks you to study children, don't go recruiting people who are 70 years old, because it's not going to be relevant for what they're asking in the question. So try to recruit a sample that is relevant to the study that you are designing. So the most important part here, though, is to describe your sampling method. Will it be opportunity sampling? Will it be a volunteer self-selected sample? Or will you try to get a random sample of participants? You need to describe the sampling method, okay? If you don't have the sampling method, your study starts losing reliability, because then I cannot repeat the study in the same way that you did. And it's imperative that I do, right? For replication purposes. So you need to add that bit of detail, the sampling method. If you don't do it, it is considered to be a minor omission, and then you start losing marks. Again, don't just throw the term in there. Try to give a brief explanation of how you will achieve that sampling method. So, for example, if you're going to do a volunteer sampling, just say that you're going to put an ad in the newspaper. Or if you're going to use opportunity sampling, just say, look, I'm going to use the university students who are available that day in order to carry out my study. It's up to you. It needs to be relevant, but you also need to provide some sort of explanation for your sampling method. Don't just throw the name there. Keep it simple, but also replicable, right? So don't do anything too complicated. Where and when, the where is a relevant location. So you need to provide a location that is going to be relevant, where your study will be taking place. So you need to pay attention again to the question, because they usually hint at a place. So for example, if they're asking you to do a lab experiment, don't go and try to do a lab experiment in the park, because that would be, obviously you would lose mark, because you probably weren't paying attention to the question. So pay attention to the question, as it will hint, it will give you a hint about what you need to be doing. So read carefully. The when, this is every timed dimension to your study. So most of your timing dimensions. So will it be a longitudinal study? Will it be a snapshot study? If it's an interview, how long will this interview last? Will it be a structured interview where you just have a limit time? Or will it be sort of an unstructured interview where people are allowed to expand their answers, and no time limit, and it will take obviously it will take a different time for every participant? Those bit of details, you need to add them here. Anything that is timing, any sort of timing related decision that you make for your suggestion needs to be included here. So anything time related goes here with a brief explanation. So again, don't just say, look, my study will be longitudinal, without saying what a longitudinal study is and how you will achieve that, or how you will be doing that. Okay. Again, if these are missing, it is also considered to be a minor omission. And if you have two minor omissions, that could actually cost you a significant amount of marks. So try to add this bits of detail into your decision quite early on into your design question, so you don't forget about them. Easy to forget. And then the last one is the how. And the how, it is how you will be using the methods described in the what section to collect the data. So a bit of a mouthful there, but it is a step-by-step account of your procedure. So sounds silly, but always start at the beginning of your design of your procedure. So say, look, my participants will arrive to the lab. We will give them, standardized instructions. We'll take their consent. We'll explain the nature of the study. Start at that point and then move forward towards the end of the study. Always focusing on how the data will be collected. So this is how you will collect data from your participants. Okay, so you told them what methods you're going to use in the what section, but now you need to tell the reader, the examiner, how you will be using those methods in order to collect the data and answer the question that they've asked you. So that is a step-by-step account of your procedure, focusing always on how the data will be collected. So some hints that I give my students: use the subheadings. So there are 5 questions. Each of those could be a different section of your question. So if you're doing the what section, just do a subheading and put all the what features in the what section. If you have the who, just talk about the sampling and the nature of your participants. And if you and then you get to the how, it'll be your procedure and things like that. So separate each section with a subheading. In fact, in my class, I don't mark the questions if they don't have the subheadings. It will help you create a mental plan for your write-up. And the more you do this once, the more you practice them, you will be able to just have automatically create this plan in your head, and it'll make your write-up so much easier, so much efficient in the future. Always keep it ethical. Always ask for consent as possible. Try to debrief again if possible. Avoid very unethical designs because you may not get any marks. If you do something horrible to your participants, the examiner is not going to give you the marks. So keep it ethical. Okay. For example, deception is acceptable as long as it is corrected during the debriefing session. So deception is okay. Just don't go applying electricity to your participants or doing unethical things, that is going to make them suffer or put them under unnecessary stress. Keep it valid. Always try to measure what you're claiming to be measuring. Always throughout your procedure, reflect. Think, are these questions actually getting the data that I need in order to answer the question that they're asking me to answer? If you are just throwing question into your what section and then later using them in your how section, and they're not providing you data that is going to sort of answer the question, you're not going to get the marks, or you're going to get partial marks. So try to keep it valid. Keep it reliable. So that what I mean by that is to keep it replicable. So doable by another set of researchers. So I don't know if your teachers have told you that's one of the evaluation points that is quite common. Your study needs to be doable. Your suggestion needs to be, I need to take away this research suggestion and I could put it into action if I wanted to. That's why I think you need to add a little bit of detail about the terminology being used. So for example, if you're using a volunteer sample, you need to explain how you're going to achieve that sampling method, because people may not know what a volunteer sampling is, but if you tell them how you're going to achieve it, you are making your study a little bit more replicable. Okay, so always try to make your study more replicable by providing an explanation of how you're going to achieve those methods. And always keep it simple. You're not here to revolutionize the field of psychology. You have about 25 minutes in the exam to do this. So keep it simple. Don't get things complicated. Just as long as it's replicable, valid, and ethical, and you follow the subheadings that you have that I've told you about, and you put the features that belong to each of those sections, you should be doing okay. At least you're going to get at least some of the marks for this question. So a good way of getting good at these ones is to do them with your classmates, collaborate, sit down and try to do one together, right? Try to create a design together, and then you do 4 or 5 of these ones with your mates, with your friends. You're going to realize that you're going to get pretty good at these ones. You're going to be able to write something pretty quickly. So collaborate with your classmates. You can do a few on your own, but then after a while, don't waste time writing every single past paper design question, because that's going to be not very efficient. You're not going to be making the best use of your time. Instead, what you should be doing is to, because you know that the subheadings and what features go into each subheadings, you collaborated with your friends, you've written some of your own. Try to plan in your head. So when you're revising, maybe do an outline, a plan outline of how you would answer this question if this was in any exam. Obviously, if you want to try some of them, you could do a full one. So whenever you do it, time yourself and try to do them in about 25 minutes. I think that would be the ideal time. Maybe if you can get less, if you can do them in less than that, that should be ideal. But I would say maybe that's too much. But anyway, you start at 25 and then you can shave some time off from those. So I hope this helps. I will leave a link to a specimen answer by CIE in the description below. I don't think I can show you all the materials that they usually send because it's copyrighted, but I think that's available, and I'll share the link with you so you can take a look at that examiner, at that specimen answer, and then you can check it against the ones that you have, and then maybe take stuff from them and pinch one or two features that you like, and then maybe correct the ones that you've done, and make sure that you're doing them correctly. So if you like this guide, please subscribe and like it, and take the notification if you want more content like this. I will try to create more guides now that the examination is coming. Until the next time, thank you very much. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.